Hey students, Miss Manley here again. Feel like I'm looking at y'all better. um, this is our last video for the day. Um, it is about architecture and design. Um, there will be pictures in a PowerPoint. Um, as far as this goes, I can't guarantee when the PowerPoint will show up. It might be like Saturday morning, but the PowerPoint will show. Um, So the thing that I want to be sure to tell you about the buildings in Britain, um, it's almost a shock to see new buildings, to see very modern looking buildings. Um, I mean, yes, along the Thames in London, um, there are modern looking buildings. There are buildings that have been made to seem modern. But for the most part, once you get out into the into the areas, you really don't see that many new buildings, um, and that's something that very much reflects the British sensibility about architecture. Um, the there have been a lot of different changes though. For the most part, though, it's kind of interesting to look and see that um, the Brits really do seem to prefer older buildings. They just like the more sturdy buildings. Um, they don't necessarily like the bold and the new. Um, there are a couple different entities that are developed to ensure that the old buildings there are restored and preserved. The National Trust, um, and the other one is called English Heritage. I think I've asked you about those on our scavenger hunt. That was my way to really let y'all get information very quickly. The the National Trust is a charity, but English Heritage is a government agency. Um, in Scotland, um, buildings are listed by Historical Scotland, um, and um, in Wales, I am just going to say the English name, um, the Welsh Historic Monuments. We have a concept when you hear in the chapter of the buildings being listed, that means they're protected, very much like here. We're starting to have some things that are protected, historic districts, if you will. So we also see that Britain has two very prestigious architecture um, prizes. Um, one of them is by the Royal Institute of British Architects, um, and it's the Stirling Prize, named after James Stirling, um, and then the Pritzker Prize. The Stirling Prize is really sort of like a yearly prize. It's whose building has made the contribution in the last year. The Pritzker is sort of overall. Um, so it's kind of interesting to see who's gotten those. I'll put a little list um, on the PowerPoint that I'm planning to do. Even though I'm doing a lecture too, I'm doing a PowerPoint. Um, so one of the things that kind of changed architecture in Britain is the idea of of some of the buildings being um, destroyed because of war. Um, they had to rebuild 2 million homes and many public buildings after the Second World War. Um, Many people might remember hearing about some of the damage to some of the churches in England. Um, And in 1951, there was a festival put together called the Festival of Britain. Um, and the focal point of this was the Royal Festival Hall. It was surrounded by exhibitions of um, new designs about with um, painting and furniture and pottery and sculpture, um, and um, it was really kind of an interesting time because a lot of things were becoming more easily available. Um, a lot of consumer products, so design began to play a much bigger role. Um, you with furniture, a lot of the designs had been kind of solid and heavy and decorated with what our textbook says is imperial grandeur. Um, the but a lot of people were looking for more functional pieces, um, and some people liked things that could seem to be like they were floating over the floor. I know some people who do that now. So one thing that was kind of interesting as well was the idea of design in cars. One of the cars we still see today that's a British car is the Mini, particularly the Mini Cooper. I love the Mini Cooper. I think they are just so cute. Um, the it's basically just it's just a little box almost. Um, the a lot of the other models compared to that were very heavy, very slow, dark interiors. Um, the Mini was just what it said. It was small. It was quick. Um, I usually see them in just very basic colors. Um, white, red, silver, um, gold. I've even seen one in gold. It's that subdued kind of gold. Um, a lot of the buildings that were on display there, they were very new designs, kind of looking for very futuristic things. Um, a lot of the architecture that was being um, commissioned at the time was from young architects who really liked the idea of the modernist look. Um, so a lot of things were um, built that were very modernist, and they're very shocking to people because they're very modernist. And then you've got these older looking houses and these these parks, gardens almost around them. Um, and the a lot of the modernist techniques went into apartment blocks. So you see these rising things that just kind of clash with the 19th century houses that were nearby them. A lot of people did not like them. Um, Even though there was a lot of complaint, there was a variation on the modernist style that was called New Brutalism, um, which some people say comes from Peter and Alison Smithson. Um, Very modernist principles, but no visual appeal to the buildings. Um, they just look like rough, unfinished surfaces. Um, and there's a picture in the textbook that shows some of the buildings in there. There's one that's peeping right over the top of the building there. I'm going to try to point to it right there. See the little rounded tip almost? Um, that one is the gherkin. Then right next to it is the cheese grater. Notice how different those look in the background compared to those in the foreground. Um, a lot of people did not like those newer things, um, and um, it's kind of interesting because like you can be in London particularly, you can be just down this street that is filled with buildings like the Royal Exchange building, and the cathedrals and the older style buildings. But then if you keep walking or you walk closer to the water, you get all these modern buildings. Um, and it's just sort of a shock to the eyes. They really do stand out. Um, there are two that really stood out to me the last time I was there. The Gherkin was one of them. um, I There was another one that I'll mention later. I'll say it a little bit more. I think it's called One Blackfriars. It was very modernistic, and it was. I remembered the building that was in front of it better than I would get the names confused, but um, then I saw the Gherkin. I went, "Oh, good Lord, it's multiplied! You get me out of here!" But it stuck with me. It really stayed with me. Some of the other things that were kind of that were seen as brutalist buildings that were the Royal Festival Hall, um, the National Film Theatre, which was relaunched as British Film Institute BFI South Bank 2007, um, and the Hayward Art Gallery, the Purcell Room, and Queen Elizabeth Hall, um, and the National Theatre. Um, the So a lot of the times the build some of the buildings that are um, dedicated to visual and expressive arts, they're very cold and serious. Um, Very few windows, no clear entrance. Um, the So a lot of people they feel kind of different about the skyscape of London. Um, a lot of a lot of people the love to use some of the details for things that they're not meant for, like skateboarding. So one of the things that's very interesting too is how the some of the education buildings. Um, Both of the colleges I went to, they were Georgian architecture, um, but by the time I left ECU in the late '90s, there were some more modernistic things happening. The library had gotten a major overhaul, and it did not look. I mean, it took the soul out of it to me. Um, and a lot of people feel like that with a lot of the education buildings. Um, so there were a lot of buildings in the '60s on British university campuses that they use plate glass, ceramic tiling, concrete towers, and a few are named in our textbook. Universities of York, University of Warwick, um, the engineering faculty at Leicester University, history faculty at Cambridge, um, the Flory building at Queen's College. Um, they're all designed by James Stirling. We've heard that name before. Stirling's work was more popular abroad, actually. A lot of people in Britain didn't like it. Um, the One building or one part of London that's a very controversial place, a focal point for very modernist design is Barbican, the Barbican Estate. Um, it's There's a picture of that in the textbook. Um, I assure you, you're going to get better I'll get better at these videos, and y'all will get you'll be able to see it a little better. You can look on the companion website too. There are a lot of these pictures on there. I love to see them in color, though. That's one of the things that bothers me a little about our textbook. I wish it were in color. Um, the so the Barbican, it has a lot of interesting things. Um, the BT Tower, British Telecom Tower, the Post Office Tower, is a listed building. Um, it's protected. Um, so there are a lot of um, public buildings, but there are a lot of private works too. Um, there was one architecture. I'll bet it when he made this comment, he was not very popular with a lot of people. Richard Seifert in the 1970s said he had done more for London than any architect since Christopher Wren. Christopher Wren was the basic designer of London. It's not cool to say that. The A lot of his designs were, as the textbook says, temples to commerce. The center point, the Tower 42, which I showed you, the you and those are some major buildings. A lot of those buildings, they're situated in the financial district that's known as the Square Mile, or the City. You hear me saying a lot about the Thames. The city is actually situated right on the Thames. I mean, it's easy. It's easy just to take a cruise down the Thames, and you see all these major buildings just right there on the banks. Um, so, a lot of times there were entire cities that were constructed. Um, the textbook gives us the idea of Letchworth, 1903, Welwyn, 1920. But there are for the in the midnight between the 50s and the 70s, 14 towns were financed. Milton Keynes, for example. Um, it was designed to look like 1960s Los Angeles. So it's kind of interesting to see that. In the 80s, the conservation became a big idea. Um, you the policy of talking about public buildings with public money um, was curtailed because there were a lot of cuts in public spending. Um, so a lot of the architecture styles came from America. Um, a lot of things were happening that they happen here. Um, Old factories, warehouses were turned into flats and banks. Banks and churches became bars and restaurants. Our textbook mentions one specifically that I really liked. They mention how Covent Garden was saved. It was this fascinating little area of London that I went to it. I absolutely adored it. It's almost like an outdoor. It's like an outdoor flea market almost. It's just you know just it's got all these outdoor cafes and boutiques and all of these neat little things. Um, the closest I could give you to kind of what is Covent Garden is if you took like all the restaurants or like downtown Tarboro almost, um, or Main Street around like Main Street Tarboro, or if you took the one part, if you kind of moved the houses out of the mill village and kind of crunched everything together, Um, you've got like the farmers market on one end of it, and you've got you the restaurants that are right and the building that was the mill that was redeveloped. Um, that's sort of Covent Garden almost. So a lot of things that a lot of things were redeveloped. A lot of things were conserved. Um, and Prince Charles has had a say in that. That's one of the things that he is known for. It's very near and dear to his heart. And the I'm betting you can find the link in the at the companion website. So a lot of the buildings were conserved. The one that I think of, I know our textbook's going to say something about it, but the Docklands in London. You can drive by and you see like this warehouse and you're told, oh yeah, that's apartments. And I said, that really reminds me. Yeah, I said, I kind of maybe that's what I think of with the Mill Village too. Um, we do see, in contrast to all these wonderful old buildings, we see these buildings that they're the high tech postmodern buildings. A lot of glass and steel and chrome, and there are several that are mentioned in our textbook. One Finsbury in London's financial district. Um, and we we see a picture of one Finsbury um, in our textbook. Oh no, my textbook just shut. Thank goodness I know. I remember the page number. Um, so one of the architects that was mentioned was Richard Rogers, and I read through the thing in our textbook. I read through it again, and I had forgotten that Rogers was responsible for the Centre Pompidou in Paris. It is a building again that's very shocking. I've only seen the Centre Pompidou in pictures, but comparing it to the Louvre, um, Pompidou really stands out. It's just like, whoa! It's a shock to the eyes, but that's what he was shooting for. Um, the other building that he is known very much for um, is the Millennium Dome, which is O2 Arena. If you ever hear about the big popular um, acts of the day, they're probably in concert at the O2 Arena. It was the Millennium Dome, and there are several other buildings where we'll hear his name. Um, so one of the things that's kind of interesting to think about is the idea of um, how things have changed since the 1990s. I mean, we're on the cusp of of the 1990s being 30 years ago. Wow. I mean, pretty soon it'll be 2020. What in the world? Um, so we see you a lot of people they talk about the older things. They like the older houses. They like they like the the idea that they have more character. That they have more individuality. They're better built. They feel like they're better built. Um, but a lot of the newer houses, um, they're they have those old features, but the new kind of inside things. Um, but it's a but even though we say something about the houses, you notice how the textbook kind of goes toward talking a lot about flats and the development of flats. And that's very much how it is in Britain. A lot of people never live in a house. They always are in a flat. Flat is like an apartment. Some of the very well off ones live in a townhouse, like I do. Um, the you especially in the city, to get a house, you've really got to move outside of London. Um, my cousin, who I've mentioned several times, um, she and her husband had they had a flat, and it was tiny, and they saved up for a long time and moved out from the city, about half an hour out of the city. Chelsfield, I believe, is the name of their village, and it has the pub. It has you, and they have a house. They have really a house. Um, Even if you have a house, I was reading a book the other day, and it was talking about the duplex or the houses. They tend to be very small. Um, I was hearing about the duplex in Britain. That's really that, and I said, well, I'm very living very British lifestyle because my little townhouse is a duplex. So um, one of the things that's kind of fascinating too is DIY, the do it yourself. Um, One of the shows that was a British show that I knew about was one called Changing Rooms, which in England, in America, we know it as Trading Spaces. That people would do that. They have a lot of the DIY things on the on one of the BBC channels, um, but there's a lot of furniture that can be put together. Um, and one of the things our textbook mentioned as well is the idea of the pub, the redevelopment of the pub. Now, a lot of people, they don't quite understand what a pub is. Um, we actually have a gastro pub in Rocky Mount, and I will tell you, I go there and I do not drink a drop, um, unless it's water or Coca Cola. Um, Even though it's in the mill village, the brew mill village. Um, it's but we see the it used to just be where you could go and you get you the food is there. The food that was there was called pub grub. Oh, how I loved pub grub. Shepherd's pie is pub grub. Bangers and mash could be pub grub. Um, Talking about food, of course. But the pubs, they would be kind of gathering spots. They would be places for people to go. But then they started to kind of change their focus a little bit. We would see like the Irish pub or the gastro pub. To give you an example of a gastro pub, Tappet 1918 in the Mill Village is a gastro pub. Um, Very shishy, fancy food. Um, even its counterpart Lou Rita's American Table is very fancy, shishy, gastropubish. Um, but that's very popular over in these parts now. So it's just kind of interesting how the you how we can see even architecture affecting the restaurants. So we have a little section as well about the female architects in Britain, um, and there are a few. Zaha Hadid um, won the Pritzker Prize in 2004. She was the first woman to do so. Um, she won it for a pavilion in Spain, and she won the Sterling Prize in 2010 and 2011. Um, so she's known. Um, Eva Jirekna is known. Um, but the problem, the major problem with having women in architecture is that it's a male dominated field. Um, that they don't there's no pay equity there, much like here. um, they're very much into the interior design part of it. So onto the next section from the textbook, the idea of the architecture as the logo. Um, a lot of times that's part of what you see um, for business, like we saw in the video, the Boxing Day video, where I held up the bag from the Tower of London, that it had the face of the Tower of London on it, or you will see like a picture of the building, on there. Um, so a lot of times that's what people will use as part of their logo. It draws people to the area. It makes them want to work for somewhere that has a very very interesting looking building. Um, the textbook mentions several that I will mention in the PowerPoint, um, and we see it's just sort of the idea of the building being interesting, so people want to see the building and they go into it. We see one that's mentioned as a shattered globe or a mint lollipop, um, which is the Urban Center for Urban Culture, um, City of Manchester Stadium. Um, a lot of people like that. Um, in Scotland, the Science Centre in Glasgow um, shows how people and plants use their senses. Edinburgh has the Dynamic Earth Centre, which is built on the site of an old brewery. The Scottish Parliament building. Um, so it's really kind of fascinating, and our textbook kind of closes the chapter off a little bit with something that I've already kind of mentioned, I've already noted, but I want to talk about it just the same. Um, the There are a lot of fascinating things in London, and you can see them almost just right in a specific area, just walking down along the Thames. The buildings are just sitting there, and if they're not, you can get off and see them. Um, the the textbook kind of mentions the Millennium Dome, which was redeveloped as O2 Center. Um, the Then it's meant the Elizabethan Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre that I mentioned um, in the Boxing Day video, is right there. Um, then the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, um, the we see the Tate Modern. Um, the thing that going back to the Shakespeare, the Globe Theatre, I will see if I can find the pictures of me at the Globe Theatre, um, just because I want you to see, you know, the theater. It's really fascinating. It's just circular. I mentioned there's a hole in the middle of it, like Shakespeare had at the at the original Globe Theatre, um, and and you could hear planes flying over. Yeah, but there were a lot of the touches, and I said, it would be fun to kind of go see something there. And it's true that one of the things they said about the Globe Theatre were that people went to listen to the play. They did not go to watch the play. That was more, you know, the groundlings who only paid a pence, a penny to get in. um, the more you paid, the less you wanted to actually see it, and the box seats really have very bad views. Actually, I went and sat in one, and I said, I would like to see the actors. I would like to. I guess I would like that. I mentioned as well the idea of the Tate Modern Art Gallery, um, which was originally the Bankside Power Station, um, and the um, the red phone boxes, the foreign off the the police box. A lot of people actually know the police box in Britain because Doctor Who's TARDIS was is perpetually a police box. Um, I will have to get that. um, it's in my guest room, and I have a guest in my guest room. So, um, the you it's really kind of fascinating just to see some of the buildings and to hear some of the architects. Like we see Anthony Caro, we see the Millennium Bridge. I have a picture of um, either me or my friend at the Millennium Bridge that it's 320 meters long and it's wonderful, spectacular views. But there's another thing that's pictured in the textbook, the London Eye, and it is not what you would think it is, but it offers magnificent views. The London Eye was constructed in, I think, about 2000, um, and it it some people think it's like riding a Ferris wheel. It's not. Um, it's the closest thing I've seen stateside is there is a, I think, sort of like it in Atlanta of all places. You go up in this car, this little enclosed car, and you can look at and see all the different views of Atlanta. But with this one, with Britain, it's really fascinating. It takes about 45 minutes to get around, so it's not um, it's not like a, it's more of a, it's very slow. And the cars, they hold about 30 people. Some people have been known to get married in a car on the London Eye. Um, you can get up and walk around. You can see the city from all sort of panoramic views. It's fantastic. Um, a lot of people don't like it because they think it takes away from the appearance. I like it. I do. Um, we see there is also the Vauxhall Cross, the home to MI6. If you've seen the James Bond film The World Is Not Enough, um, you might have seen the MI the you might have seen the MI6 building. Um, I seem to remember seeing the MI6 building in Broadchurch as well. Um, so we across the river from the Tate Modern is the Tate Britain, which is the older, some of the older artwork. Um, then the British Museum. Oh, fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. It's really fascinating because you can go in there and there's a reading room kind of right. They remodeled the entrance from when I went the first time and the second time. Um, you walk in and it looks like it's going to be. You go, oh gosh, what has happened? But it's this big circular thing, and right in the middle of it is the reading room. Um, for with some of the things from the British Library in it. Um, so really, really, just really neat place. If you get the chance to go to the British Museum, do it. Um, like I told you, I could spend the whole day there. I have. I could. Um, so we see Wembley Stadium as well. We see the Queen Elizabeth II Olympic Park and some of the things that were built for the 2012 Olympics. We see the Aquatics Center, which was actually built in 2004. Um, but we can see as well the building that is the tallest building um, in the European Union, while England is still in the European Union. Yes, I said Brexit. Um, and it is called the Shard because it looks like a shard. There will be a picture of that for you to see. Um, then there's some of the other ones. The thing I don't like about the text, one of the things that I'm gonna research, um, the the textbook just gave the nicknames of the buildings. um, like the walkie-talkie. Um, but I did look up the real name for the gherkin. I can never remember it, but I looked it up. Um, the um, the Leadenhall building, the one that I called the cheese grater earlier. It looks like a cheese grater, y'all. It looks like a cheese grater. Um, it's 225 meters high. The gherkin is called the gherkin because, well, it looks like a gherkin. It's basically like if you were drawing like a candle. It looks like that, and it's got just all these shapy things on it. It's it won a Sterling Prize for its innovation. Um, so a lot of things have changed. I forgot to mention two buildings. Let me mention the two buildings before we kind of conclude on things, because it's time to do that. It's already 41 minutes in. Oh my goodness. Um, so there is a building as well that I'm going to put a picture of in your PowerPoint called the Scalpel, and that's what it looks like, a scalpel. It's opposite the Lloyd's building, which is one of the popular buildings that Richard Rogers was mentioned for several times in our chapter. And I mentioned one that I liked. I would get that. I looked at the gherkin and I said, "Oh, the gherkin looks like one Blackfriars." Um, I'll let you guys make the decision. I'll put a picture of one Blackfriars up there. So the things to kind of take away from this is to remember that London is sort of like everything else around. It's got some redevelopment going on. Um, of things that are there, but there are new things coming along, and some of them can be quite shocking and very modernist. Um, so I might as well try to find the link um, to the BBC Four um, most hated buildings in the UK. Just for you guys to see some of the not so pretty buildings. Um, so I hope you've enjoyed the videos, um, and I will talk with you all later. Happy Boxing Day!